Hey guys, in today's spot we're going to be going back and revisiting the NECA Toys A Nightmare on Elm Street. This is NES Freddy Krueger. Let's get the tape measure going. Freddy Krueger, if you technically count his fedora, is about 7.5 inches tall. Minus the fedora, he's about 7 inches tall. Speaking of his fedora though, that's the only accessory that NES Freddy comes with. And the fedora, much like Freddy Krueger himself, comes, well, slightly discolored from maybe the traditional color of the fedora that we're so used to seeing. Here we have a more lighter brown color, whereas the regular fedora is a more kind of dark brown, almost borderline black. It's still made up of a softer rubber material, which I just dropped onto the floor. Yes, as I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted by something falling. The fedora is a soft, rubbery plastic. And it fits on his head, but it doesn't seem like it fits very well. A lot of times you might find yourself really forcing it down onto Freddy's head to keep it in place. It does sit, like I said, a little on the loose side. You really have to kind of smush it down to get it to stay on Freddy. Freddy here, I would more inclined to be displaying him with the fedora because kind of in-game, you generally saw Freddy with his fedora on. So that's for my desired look for presentation, I would display him with the fedora. However, for the sake of this review, we're going to take off the hat and have a look at Freddy's face, which I believe is based on the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Master, or Dream Warriors Freddy. Unfortunately, I can't find that figure right now to do a comparison between the two. But the sculpt on the face is done quite nicely. The paint, though very minimum, is actually quite good too. It's all kind of one consistent paint color, kind of a flesh tone making up the majority of his head, because like even in the game, he doesn't really have a lot of defined details to him. His face kind of just looks like a blob, and a lot of times you just see him moving across the screen like this. So of course, NECA had to take some luxuries. At least they used this head sculpt, which I think is a better head sculpt to use like versus say the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1 Freddy. I do like that they've got a big glaring smile. Again, like this head sculpt uses that. And it's kind of creepy that they colored in his eyes. They colored in his teeth as well, so his gums are kind of an off, I want to say, almost like a purple color. But the eyes are a really dark color as well, so you can't even see his pupils, which kind of adds to a real creep factor for this particular sculpt. Again, it's a great looking head sculpt, loads of cool sculpted details there as well. I got absolutely no complaints with the head sculpt whatsoever. When we get to the rest of his body, again, it's making use of an older Freddy Krueger, so unfortunately it doesn't have the articulation in the legs. You can't do really anything with the torso other than, well, the lower torso, other than just rotating it at the ball joint. And then you can still you have the ball joints on the shoes as well, where you can rotate the feet. But sculpt-wise, it's a really good-looking Freddy. I've never had any problems with the Freddy Kruegers that NECA have churned out. Shy for, of course, the fact that they don't have the articulation on the lower legs. But despite the fact that there's no articulation in the legs, the sculpts still are superior, at least in the pants, where you can see, like, he's got a big, baggy pant that bunches up really at the bottom where it attaches to the shoe, or just drapes itself over the shoe. The coloring, as you could probably guess it, don't adjust your monitor, the coloring is off. Well, the coloring is off for Freddy Krueger, but it's not off for how he appears in the game. Instead, kind of like Jason, instead of going with more traditional movie colors, they instead go with something a little bit more outrageous. So the red and the green on the sweater is swapped now out for almost like a mustard yellow and almost the color of a very vibrant orange drink. The pants are not quite the same color. They're a little bit more closer to kind of like a cherry, almost like an orange cherry colored red. The hand as well as the glove hand are both sculpted nicely, and again given a very, very basic paint application of kind of the same color as his flesh head. The sculpt on the glove is quite nice. I do prefer this kind of hand sculpt where they got the two fingers curled back and then the two fingers extended outward. It's one of my favorite hand sculpts that NECA has done with their Freddys. So no complaints whatsoever right there. Some nice little shredded areas of the sweater add some extra detail to this particular figure, and you can even see like the individual fibers of the way that the sweater was put together. None of this is really relative to NES Freddy. It just so happens that, you know, they're just making use of the same Freddy body. Could this guy have come with more accessories other than just the fedora? Absolutely, but I mean, really, for an NES Freddy, they were really basically looking to reuse the mold. And I think NECA has kind of got themselves in a nice little bracket where they're releasing figures that we've seen before with a brand new paint scheme. I specifically am not a big fan of companies that reuse molds. I'm really against the idea of reusing molds. But when they do it right, it's something where you've got a good figure that comes out of it. Freddy Krueger, on the other hand, like Freddy Krueger, for example, is a good example of this, where I've got this mold. I've gotten, you know, basically all the Freddys that they've released. So giving me an NES Freddy is something that I would entertain myself getting, and in fact did get, because I thought he looked really cool. Just as a side note, though, unfortunately, I don't have the Nintendo game Nightmare on Elm Street. It's still one of my games I'm looking to find. I do have a couple of the Friday the 13th. I think I have 2 of those, but still, the Nightmare on Elm Street has eluded this guy. So sad. One of these days, I will find the means. Maybe I'll go on eBay or something and pick it up, because the game, as you know, as bad and cheesy as it does look, and the gameplay of it, it still looks like a fun pick up and play that you know, eventually I would like to see myself picking up and playing. Let's run through his posability. His head is on a ball joint. Head rotates all the way around and a hinge up and down. He does have the upper torso ball joint, the hinge on the shoulders, a universal joint actually, so the arms hinge outward as well as a full rotation. He does have the bend in the elbow. He has a rotation on the lower arm, and he has a rotation in the hand. Now the hands are pegged into place, so not only do they rotate, but you can also hinge the hands back and forth. Now we get to the posability on the lower legs, and as we've already discussed it, all the articulation basically is in the torso and then the lower feet. The rest of this is absolutely staction. There's nothing really that you can do other than admire the fact that the sculpt on it is still pretty good. NECA has released a total of 3 horror video game inspired characters. The Freddy Krueger that we looked at here, the just recently revisited Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th, and they also released an Atari version of Leatherface, which, as you probably have saw from watching that video, the coloring is off. Instead of giving him a more blue color, NECA opted to give him a green color. I'm not really sure why they ended up doing that. Maybe I might revisit that particular figure, but I definitely did want to revisit this Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's still a game I want to pick up, still a game I want to add to my collection, but I can luckily say that I've added this guy to my collection, and I really enjoy these video game inspired characters. I'm sure, again, it's making use of molds that we've seen before. Any avid collector of these Freddys will obviously recognize this Freddy from a figure that they already own in their collection, but there's something to be said about giving him a new paint application that kind of gives him a brand new life. NECA's really good at doing that, and while other companies, I feel, often double dip or triple dip too often into their existing mold library, NECA seem to be okay with, because what they end up churning out are some really spectacular figures as a result. Today, once again, we were revisiting the NECA Toys A Nightmare on Elm Street. This was NES Freddy Krueger. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. Make sure you have a chance to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And if you specifically want to check out some more Freddy Krueger reviews, I've got a playlist dedicated just for that. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. See you next time.